Warning. This episode contains adult language and adult humor. Since when have trumpet players ever been considered adults? If you are easily offended by these types of conversations, consider switching to the oboe. Welcome to the Trumpet Gurus Hang podcast. I'm your host, Jose Johnson. My guest for this episode is Tom Walsh. Tom is one of the young lions on the London music scene. A graduate of the Royal Academy of Music, Tom has gone on to forge a name for himself in the studio and on the stage on both sides of the pond. And Tom's ultra-hip work as an arranger has started to catch the attention of artists and fans worldwide. Tom is a sweetheart of a guy and one mother of a player. So pour yourself a big glass, pull up a chair, and let the hang begin. Welcome to this episode of the Trumpet Gurus Hang, and I have got with me today Mr. Tom Walsh, all the way from London. What's up, man?
Cheers, brothers and sisters. How are we doing?
Cheers, my friend. So I'm really excited about this hang. This is the first time Tom and I are actually getting a chance to meet, and I'm really psyched about this. I found out about Tom through Jarreau, and you know, anybody who Jerry thinks is a talented guy has got to be a talented guy. And so he's had nothing but tremendous things to say about Tom and his playing and his arranging. So I'm looking forward to getting to know more about this guy. So let's just jump in on I guess the big question for me, talking with you after listening to some of your stuff is, man, what is going through your head on some of those charts, man? They are just nuts.
Oh, well, it's been a strange old path to get to kind of certainly the horn arranging world. That's kind of like, I don't know, it's piqued my interests for so long now. It was kind of all a bit of a lightning bolt moment hearing the great Jarreau for the first time. Well, of course, without realizing it, I would have heard him plenty of times on the background on almost every hit ever.
Right.
But I think probably the first time I just started on a jazz trumpet degree in London, and I was a diehard, Freddie Hubbard, kind of Clifford Brown, Lee Morgan, Dizzy Gillespie nut.
Right.
And I was obsessed with jazz, and then I'd heard Working Day and Night by Michael Jackson for the first time, and it was a case of, from then on, I was hooked. Started transcribing, takedowns, everything, and from then on, just trying to kind of, I just thought I've got to start writing my own stuff and try and see how it all works, and learnt from kind of demoing stuff up. I guess that's kind of like the beauty of home recording now. Just kind of start to track stuff up myself and work out how it kind of fit together, and from then on, I don't know, I guess try and maybe add a little bit of jazz harmony in the same way Jerry did or other people did, and then go from there, and then find a bunch of players crazy enough to want to play it. That's probably the key.
Yeah, that's always it. And some of the stuff I was listening to on your YouTube channel, just like you were saying, some of the voicings that you use, some of the jazz harmonies that you threw in, it just completely took me off guard, which is, great. I mean, I think like you, Jerry has been out of all, and fortunately had the chance to interview him, I had like three major influences on me in trumpet. The first was Herb Alpert. I'm just old enough that was, he was cool. Yeah. And in terms of music, I mean, as a trumpet player, not the greatest trumpet player, to ever pick up a horn, but in terms of what he did with music and the impact he's continued to have on the music industry and society, great dude. The second was Maynard Ferguson. What can you say? First time you ever hear, that kind of playing, it just, changes your world. And then when I first understood, like you, when I first identified Jerry with the stuff that I had been listening to on the radio. And it's like, oh, put two and two together. And that just opened my mind to a whole new approach to what the trumpet was capable of doing in a popular music setting. And the sound that section got was just, whew, man, scary.
It's just world ending, really. And I think, like you said, I think it's great that, Jerry, I'm sure we'll get onto this, but I've been so lucky to kind of get to know him.
When you look at the changes that occurred in the landscape of trumpet, I mean, you definitely, like you said, Freddie, man, completely changed the world of trumpet. Obviously, go back a little bit earlier, you got Miles, go back further, Dizzy, all the way back to Pops, and then you've got the newer generation of people coming up. So. Who are some of your influences of the past, and what are some of the things that you want to bring to the table as a player to take things to the next level?
That's a great question. I guess you always cite your first influences, don't you? So when I first started taking the trumpet seriously, for me it was Dizzy Gillespie. I think it wasn't a spectacularly kind of. I think I had a compilation album of some of his Bluebird recordings, but it had everything through to kind of, him and Charlie Parker trading on quintet things, all the way through to some of the big band things I think he did for RCA in like the mid 40s, kind of heading towards the 50s. So without realizing it, this one little CD that I think probably my dad picked up from a charity shop, bless him, it suddenly felt like it held all the keys to the kingdom. And I then went out and kind of got a copy of Dizzy's autobiography, which had a great name anyway. It's called To Be or Not to Bop.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was just great. I mean, so he was, you've got absolutely no holds barred with someone like his playing, because you start with such a fearsome technique. There's no range of the trumpet. He invented bebop vocabulary on the trumpet, so he's flying around the thing. But also, of course, in some of the kind of B-sides, I guess, of some of these old RCA records, he plays beautifully on these ballads. And actually, weirdly, there's one that I remember on that compilation called Dizzier and Dizzier, which was a really haunting tune. And then I think you kind of get straight into this rip-roaring big band solly. And it, again, not really being that exposed to big band music at that stage, that kind of, not only did I love small group jazz, but then you hear that all on the same record. So I've got to say he was very early on. And then probably Miles came after, actually. Yeah. I think I probably heard the Gil Evans records. And again, I think by that point, I'd almost fallen in love with the whole big band sound, orchestration. Mm-hmm. And I guess actually, without realizing it, I was always kind of hooked by the orchestration side of things within the big band jazz orchestra setting. So yeah, the Miles Gill stuff going all the way from like Birth of the Cool all the way through to kind of, Sketches of Spain, Porgy and Bess, and, and Miles Ahead as well, which I think was the first big collaboration. After that, I was checking out a couple of, on the radio over here in England, they used to, sadly is no longer the case, but they used to have used to be a state-funded radio big band called the BBC Big Band. Everyone's heard of the BBC. Unfortunately, the jazz kind of bands were the first to get axed in the budget cuts. But the great Derek Watkins used to play lead trumpet in that radio orchestra, and so every Monday night I'd go to my little blow band rehearsal, just like a rehearsal band on a Monday night. Then my dad would drive me home, and I'd listen to Derek Watkins, and their star. At the time, the BBC had a star jazz trumpet soloist who, as soon as I heard him play, I was absolutely hooked by. He's a guy called Gerard Presenza. And he's, I guess a lot of people, again, without realizing it, they would have heard him on a track that was pretty famous in the 90s. It was a Blue Note record by an artist called Us Three, and there was some rapping. It's like a remake of Cantaloupe Island.
Yeah, Cantaloupe. Yep. Yeah, and that solo is phenomenal.
Man, that's a whole nother story. And I'm sure, to be honest, Gerard's a great person to speak to about all of his anecdotes in the world of music. I mean, without going too into detail, I know that there was something involved. I think he was about 17 or 18 when he recorded that solo, and I think he probably got it. I think he probably got a princely sum of like $100 for the entire recording, and that was all he ever saw. Anyway, but yeah, basically, as soon as I heard his playing, I was hooked by it, and he happened to be the head of the Royal Academy of Music's jazz course in London. So by this stage that I was hearing him, he'd really kind of got further into higher education, jazz specifically, and so I kind of made it my goal to go and study with him in London. I wanted to be on that course, and through a bit of bunking off some of my A levels over here in kind of like 16 to 18, I wasn't necessarily found in some of the classrooms in my school. I'd just be trying to hunt down which ones had practice rooms free. Okay. And that's kind of like because I knew at that stage, I knew that I'd had to have, I was going to have to kind of practice pretty hard to kind of get to college level. I was never a very promising classical student. I kind of progressed through a lot of the kind of graded exams and managed to kind of pass them by the skin of my teeth most of the time. But there was like all sorts of technique things that I never really got together. And I mean, Jerry actually has all the secrets. He's heard me in a room. He can hear all the things that I can't do, because he's given me a few lessons before. They've been world changing for me, but it must have been like teaching an absolute beginner at times. But it's been a great kind of road to get there. But Gerard Presenza, I'd definitely anyone that's a fan of kind of contemporary kind of jazz trumpet playing in the modern era. He's played with so many killer musicians, and he's like an amalgam of, he digs early 60s Freddie. He's got a lot of amazing pentatonic shapes like Woody Shaw, and actually one of the most gorgeous rounded kind of flugelhorn tones I've ever heard. It felt like a MIDI keyboard, how slotted his pitch was. And it was just this beautiful round tone. So luckily I got to study with him, and then of course I got to meet, just from being around the city and starting to kind of do the odd gig here and there in college, I got to meet a lot of my deplorable and favorite trumpet characters in London. And it's a massive city full of some incredible players in every idiom now. So I'm very lucky to count myself as one of the small few in the city, but they've all been incredibly welcoming. I could reel off so many names, but I'm sure you probably have heard of them over where you are as well. They kind of tend to kind of make waves whatever they do, really.
Yeah. So you went to the Royal Academy, correct? And that's very prestigious school. And who were some of the other professors there? I think was Mike one of your professors there?
I was wondering if that might be. Yeah, I was going to see if you had that. Yeah, Mike Lovett, who's a top session and kind of lead trumpet player over here. He was my teacher throughout the 4 years at college as well. So I primarily was just hell-bent to go study with Gerard, just I guess for his improvisational concepts more than anything, but then actually just hearing him in a room and hearing him, he used to shred over Donna Lee in A major, in 7/8, and all these sort of things. And when you hear that sort of thing happen, it's sometimes, as an 18-year-old or something, the best thing is to just let it wash over you. And if you can pick up any little kernels for yourself, just kind of take anything you can get. But it's just great to kind of listen to it. But yeah, Mike was instrumental as well. He really massively helped me out as I started to kind of get professional work in London and stuff. And he put a good name out for me, and kind of, we would talk through some of the kind of, it wasn't a method that I went super down the road of, but he's a big advocate of the Maggio kind of method, and he teaches at all the London colleges. I mean, he's strong as an ox. I'm sure everyone's heard him with the John Wilson Orchestra and Seth MacFarlane's albums and things like that. So it's kind of, just crazy kind of getting a chance to meet those type of people, those type of players.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds like you kind of had a plan going into things of at least an idea of where you wanted to be. And I feel that's so important because so many people, especially not just younger people. I mean, even hell, people my age sometimes they lose track of what they want to accomplish in life, and then you kind of wander aimlessly. So once you got to school, did your vision of where you wanted to be change, or did you just kind of stay the course?
I think that's a really cool thing you just said there, actually, because I guess it's kind of, without realizing it, I think I was always fairly moldable with my musical ideas. I guess I was always ready to be guided. You do see some people at a college level. It's not a criticism at all, but it's kind of like, I guess it's kind of advice that I'd like to give anyone that's approaching that music college kind of age, would be just, it doesn't really matter necessarily who your teachers are, as long as you've kind of got a strong head on your shoulders, and like you said, you've been checking out a lot of music, you have an idea of what you want to go for, then I think anything's kind of achievable to a certain extent if you're surrounded by a good bunch of people. I think because it was such a melting pot of musicians from all over the UK, Europe, and further afield. It kind of meant that they were all kind of coming into college and giving their own influence, and it was just nice to meet that caliber of player. I certainly, probably age 18, for instance, I'd been checking out loads of bebop and hard bop, and I guess I was probably wanting to aim to be something more like Freddie Hubbard. But then, like I said, got slightly sidetracked for about, let me see, was 10 years and counting, with the Jarreau influence. And
Yeah.
that took me one direction. I love playing lead trumpet in big bands. I played in a youth jazz orchestra at college age that was called the National Youth Jazz Orchestra, which a lot of the great jazz and session musicians in the UK, that orchestra's been going for well over 50 years now. So there's kind of, actually in the first iteration of that band was, again, one of my lead trumpet heroes who just had his 60th birthday the other day in London, a guy called Simon Gardner, who plays lead trumpet on our version of Dancing with the Stars, like Strictly Come Dancing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he played with Buddy Rich, Sinatra, everyone. But everyone actually, there's a load of people that came through this National Youth Jazz Orchestra, which was a super invaluable tool to go through there, because they didn't even have an audition process. It was incredible. You could turn up on a Saturday morning, and they'd kind of divide the bands into different kind of ability ranges. But I was able to kind of go there, and mainly actually, I guess, being more of an ear musician than someone that could read very well. And then, but of course, if you get put into a situation with a load of,
Right.
it's like it's all these student written charts. They're all writing at age 18, 19 with a point to prove, writing off both sides of every clef. And eventually, just by sheer information overload, some of it has to kind of seep in. So that's kind of really where I learned to read. And that particular pad, I know a lot of people attribute it to kind of, like that's kind of where they really got their sight reading together. And it was certainly the same for me. But yeah, I was never wanted to be just a lead trumpet player or just a jazz trumpet player, just because I had a lot of different influences.
Right.
I kind of wanted to kind of make sure that my sound was malleable enough to fit certain settings, I guess. So I guess if there was any concepts at a young age, it was just trying to kind of keep everything floating and see where the current takes you, but to not be stuck in one regime or way of thinking. So it's kind of, but yeah, and within the jazz course, there was all sorts of, you'd cover everything from doing like Bix Beiderbecke and Louis Armstrong stuff all the way through to playing Kenny Wheeler charts. And then, some of the more entertaining recitals at my time in college were the proper free-for-all, free-form jazz ones, where people might walk out of the audience, but you'd be having a bit of fun anyway.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah. So, as I was doing a little research on your background, I saw that you've worked with a lot of different people, but I found out we do have a connection. You worked with Vince Mendoza, and I went to college with Vince. We went to Ohio State together, And I actually haven't seen him since I left Ohio State back in the early '80s. But yeah, I've been so impressed with the work that he's done. I mean, I was impressed with his work when he was when he was in college. But you know, the stuff that he's been doing. Like, what's it like working with Vince?
Oh, I can't tell you what a thrill that is. I mean, it's kind of, I don't, I again, all these strange, probably pseudo millennial ways into these type of influences that are kind of funny looking back on it. I think probably the first time I was ever aware of Vince Mendoza was that scene in that Christmas film, Love Actually. You know, the scene
Yeah.
where Emma Thompson plays Joni Mitchell, and
Hmm.
that's that heartbreaking rendition of. I mean, it's a heartbreaking scene, but I think probably it has the album cover featured, and I know that was a huge record for him. But not only that, it was a huge record, I think, for the whole London scene. And
Hmm.
ever since then, I guess we're very lucky living in this city because Vince has always been a champion, and I think he always kind of has enjoyed a champion of the London scene. He's always enjoyed coming to London and making records with the players there. So again, just going back to a trumpet note, you've got Derek Watkins, John Barclay, and actually my old teacher, Jarreau, presents us in the section on that Both Sides Now record. So again, just all these kind of A-list London trumpet players. But yeah, as a jazzer as well, it kind of, Vince's kind of original compositions and everything like that were kind of very well, just well documented and well revered amongst in our scene, all the way through back to the 90s records and everything. It all kind of became part of the lexicon of stuff that we check out. So it was, a very surreal chance to kind of work with him with the band in Cologne, the VDR, the WDR big band, which again, one of my all-time favorite big bands, featuring one of my all-time favorite lead trumpet players, Andy Harderer.
Hmm.
I guess, well, I know a lot of people. There was one particular busy weekend in 2000. This is a couple of years ago now, I guess, December of 2016. There was one. It was probably like a couple of weekends before Christmas, and there was a load of Christmas gigs going on. But for whatever reason, I think the first and the second trumpet player had to pull out of this concert and recording project. So it meant that I think Vince put a request in to say, well, can we get a lead trumpet player over from London? And I guess kind of some of the people weren't around, and the call ended up coming to me. So I dropped everything and flew over there. And I've got to say, he's an absolute gent. I arrived the night before the session. I got an email from him saying, thanks so much for helping us out. Do you fancy meeting for breakfast in the hotel? And again, just it's so nice when you meet these people and they're just great human beings. They put all nerves aside, and just like Jerry, they're dead serious when it comes to music, but they're not letting that kind of the perfectionist ways kind of like affect their psyche or anything like that. It was kind of working with him was it was a bit like when I finally got a chance to play under Jerry's watchful eye. It was a case of, I think at that stage you're hopefully relying off some sort of instinct and some skills you've honed to get to that stage, because you don't really want to you don't want to miss the thrill of the experience. I think kind of it's difficult sometimes as a musician to bottle that, because you're so focused on doing your job to a higher level that you kind of one experience turns into the other, and you can get the blinkers on in your own little world. But yeah, working with Vince actually was a massively, it was, I mean, the music was incredible. It was this Pat Metheny's drummer, Antonio Sanchez.
Yeah.
It was all of his music, his original music for his band Migration, scaled up for big band. So it was a bit of a roast, like lots of odd time signatures
Yeah.
But again, no, Vince was incredibly kind, and that basically we've been in touch since then. And actually, strangely, I'm not, just in case he's not announced it or anything, but he called me. That was one of the best days I've had in lockdown, in this little spare bedroom of mine, come recording studio. I've just recorded some stuff up for Vince, actually, for one of his upcoming projects, like kind of did some trumpet section work on that. So it was nice to be in touch with him again. And yeah, as an arranger, he's one of my absolute favorites.
Yeah.
So many great projects of his with the Metropole Orchestra, the VDR, everything. It's he's just a gent. What can I say?
Yeah.
I'm sure you have the same experience.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I said, I haven't seen him since the '80s, but he was always a good guy, and just always willing to just give you an encouraging word, or just hang out and have a cup of coffee. So and that's important. I think that life is too short to be an asshole, basically, and especially in the music world, because there's no shortage of talented players out there, but you're the thing you can do to there are two things you can do to make sure you don't get called back on a gig. One is just not to play well, and then the other is just to be an idiot, because nobody wants to work with the idiots.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a great mantra to live by, and also it reminds me again the same thing rephrased slightly differently. But the head of that course at the academy, he's a great raconteur, and again, great trumpet player, a guy called Nick Smart, who, if it wasn't for his guidance at college, I should have probably been thrown out a couple of times for misbehaving. But he's always fought my corner, and we're close friends now, and he really is a mentor to me as well. But I think he said something to all these aspiring, these jazz musicians that are kind of packed into I'm lucky to have gone there. It's a very prestigious course where they handpick usually only one player per instrument per year on the jazz course. And sometimes it just means that you grow up in 1 year with like a small group combo, essentially.
Right.
And so probably like similar to like the Monk Institute or something like that. But I think he said once upon a time, he just said, well, look, it's taken as given that you're all going to come out of here completely killing. And then it's just a case of people are going to want to work with you if you're a nice person. It's kind of, I always thought that it was a quite cool thing everyone is actually amazing at what they're doing here at this level. And it's kind of, after that, it's just fine tuning. And hopefully you don't have to be the sort where you have to try to be a nice guy, because of course, like anywhere and any profession, there's going to be two-faced people along the way. But no, you're right. If I think about all the people that have been so kind to me, kind of coming up on the instrument and forgiving all of my mistakes, essentially, musically and otherwise. It's you're right. That's definitely the way to be.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're young enough that technology is not a stranger to you, and sometimes, but in terms of like the way things have progressed, as you were just talking about, doing some recording for Vince, a lot of the stuff that's on your YouTube channel, it's you and your guys in the home studio, as opposed to like the traditional, going to, like, if you're in LA, going to Capitol Records and sitting in the A studio or something like that. But I know you do both. I mean, you've done the traditional recording studio, you do the home thing. What do you see as the biggest difference between those two? I mean, do you have to adjust your mindset? Do you find one, more preferable than the other?
That's another great question. I think, to be honest, the only reason I ever started dabbling with the idea of home recording was to try and synthesize that skill set. I guess by the time I graduated, which was 2013, I think I've been working professionally around before that, and kind of, up until graduation. But it would be a myth to say that the session scene compared to days of, 30 years ago is booming. Of course it's not, but there is still work to be had. But I just thought to myself, well, do you know what? I need to just get used to the sensation of things like having cans on my head, or, what does the trumpet feel like when you've got that ear off? What does it sound like? What does it kind of feel like with this ear off, and things like that? And it was actually, I used it as more of a practice tool, if anything, recording myself, just because you could kind of, there's no way of lying. It's all very good and well, especially for jazz. It was the most amazing practice. It's kind of, like, just give yourself one chorus on Cherokee or something like that, and if you go back and listen to it, you kind of always inevitably have moments of, oh, what was I thinking? Or sometimes you'll hear licks that you knew you were already going to play in advance, and you can work out those kinks, and you can kind of. So I used it originally as like a practice tool, like you said, practicing my own arrangements, trying to work out if that voicing worked, or if this type of double tracking worked. And it did wonders for my consistency. But then, like you said, I think there is a slightly different mantra to recording in a studio, and this might just be me, but I feel like it's a bit more of a similar sensation to playing a gig, I think, because the concentration, if you're recording from home now, you know, at the end of the day, you want to be doing as much of the work as you can and keep it as musical as possible. But if you need to, the reality is now with kind of Pro Tools and Logic or things like that, you can drop in phrase by phrase. But then if you get something incredibly difficult in a recording studio with 50 other people, you've got to do it the old-fashioned way too. So I think, obviously now with over 3 months into the lockdown, so it's a case of, you know, I can't even remember what it feels like to kind of go back to a professional recording session environment. Although I think maybe over here that's due to happen anytime soon. But it's kind of, yeah, I think it's more of a, I mean, again, this great lead trumpet player, Simon Gardner, said, I think he described the great session players that he sat next to, people like John Barclay, Derek Watkins, and then going back to older than that, Tony Fisher, kind of Kenny Baker, all these kind of revered, amazing lead trumpet players that would have nerves of steel in the recording studio. And I think it is just a concentration thing. It really is about kind of just kind of having that kind of horse blinkered kind of concentration for things. So I try and approach studio playing, I guess, more like a performance where you can't really swear between takes if you screw a note up. So it's kind of as you can at home.
Yeah.
But it's I think it's a great tool for anyone, not just trumpet, but any instrument. If you learn to record yourself these days as well, it's, you know, you can. I think Jerry was very instrumental in kind of helping me at the right time to kind of get some of the right mics that I now use in my professional studio that I rent. But it, you know, for the purposes of learning and starting off, you can come up with amazing sounding results from just like something that cost a couple of $100 or something. It's really fairly affordable now, and the technology keeps getting cheaper and better. I mean, there are some things that don't get cheaper and better, like vintage microphones or, you know, instruments and things like that. That always seems to be kind of going on the up and up, but there's definitely a path into anyone that wants to do it. And certainly most of it's kind of, like you said, YouTube's such a resource. You can kind of find everything you need. You can go down a rabbit hole at 4 a.m. and learn how to do your side chain compression, whatever you want to learn how to do, and use it to taste, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I am very impressed by that idea of using the studio as your practice. I mean, certainly everybody can use it as just a practice tool, but I think that's a really, really smart thing to do, is to use it, not just for recording your personal playing, but recording your ideas, getting how voicing sound, understanding how the cans affect you, because so many people just, they roll into the studio and just approach it the same way they would in a practice room or on stage, and it's a completely different environment. So that's a great idea. So any of you listening out here who want to get into studio work, maybe start practicing your studio skills at home.
It's a great tip. And I mean, I was always a fan of Jay Graydon as a producer and as a session musician, because of all the Jerry Hay connection and everything, and the David Foster connection. Mm-hmm. So on his website, actually, there's a fantastic little essay almost. I mean, I can tell that Jay is quite an intense bloke. So he's going to be kind of writing, when I say essay, it is a 30-page manual on studio etiquette and things like that. But there's silly little things that have really, I think if you want to be a studio musician now, and of course, sadly, a lot of them, and hopefully after this crisis, fingers crossed, there will be plenty still up and running. But, you have to kind of, I think people coming up now have to kind of try and think as quickly as they possibly can and assimilate all the different jobs within the studio as you can. So you need to be a little bit clued up on mic position, mic technique. You need to kind of know a little bit more about foldback, for instance, because one of the kind of typical things that I sometimes find if I'm working with certain stick in the mud type musicians is you'll hear them cranking their own individual levels up, more of me, more of me, more of me. And you kind of think to yourself, well, actually, it's going to be probably a little bit more beneficial if you can practice at home, just getting used to hearing a bit more of your acoustic sound and kind of, and, you know, a bit like a Bobby Shoe thing, practice off the resistance of the trumpet. You need to make sure that kind of, that remains the same because, and I did a tour last year on in-ear monitors, and I ended up finding that was kind of really screwing with my kind of whole ear canals and ear, nose and throat type thing. So I'd find myself getting a lot of tension in my neck, which was a problem I really had to address a bit of time ago. And of course, what was the solution was to find a nice acoustic and go practice acoustically in a room so that you're kind of, you know, it's not natural to have these on all the time, even though I think we style it out okay. I think we're looking okay.
Yeah, we're doing good. Yeah, I mean, for me, I love in-ear monitors mostly because the work that I do primarily is very loud, playing with like, funk bands and, that sort of thing, and having drummers who insist on trying to take your head off with the cymbals. But it took me a while to get used to what the sound was coming out of the horn as opposed to how I was hearing the sound myself. One of my teachers had made a comment to me because I was playing so damn loud, just killing myself, trying to hear myself over the band. And he's like, no, if you've got a sound man, you have to trust that the sound man's doing his job. You just need to play your horn. So I had to really spend a lot of time practicing with in-ears at home and trying to equate the feeling that I was having with the sound that I was getting. And I think that a lot of times people look at the technology as a solution, but they don't, as we were talking about earlier, they don't do the practice to get that connection, because it is a slightly different approach.
Oh, massively. And it was just, I found exactly the same thing. And I can't say that I'm an expert at playing with in-ears. I know that people like Rashawn Ross that I know, who's an absolute monster. He's out with Dave Matthews Band the whole time. And I think he's actually got maybe a couple of different monitoring setups. I think he has like a wedge and some in-ears. But I mean, someone like him is probably an absolute guru to go to. And I've only had probably 2 sets of molds ever with in-ears. But I think, like you said, there's such an amazing tool in terms of you don't have to damage your hearing by cranking everything as loud, certainly. And but it was good for me to, my own personal experience was, and of course I was still playing the gig night after night on in-ears, but just having a little bit of time in a room beforehand without anything plugged in, it kind of made me think, okay, yes. And like you said, I was certainly overblowing, certainly playing far too loud. So I think that's probably a lesson that I have to keep telling myself on a daily basis.
Yeah, well, you and about 30 million other trumpet players. So, yeah. Well, I know you have worked with Jerry both professionally and also your friendship, and you've done some studying with him as well. And Jerry's a big proponent of the of Bill Adam and his concepts. And did you find that to be kind of something that helped you to clarify your approach to playing, like the mental side of trumpet playing, because that's a huge part of what Jerry does?
I think I've got to say, going to study with Jerry and Gary Grant, super. I can't really believe that the stars aligned, and I was lucky enough to do it and to know them at the time. But they were so generous with their time. But like you said, it was talking to these Zen masters of the instrument, and I've got to say that they're probably, the lessons with Jerry and Gary it's completely revolutionized the way that I play the trumpet and some of the things that Jerry diagnosed. And it's kind of, I was very lucky that he was in a position to want to even essentially give me the keys to the kingdom, or he's always been so generous with his time and his advice to everyone. I think we probably originally started messaging way back when, probably nearly 10 years ago, probably on Facebook when he joined. And it's surreal to think how it's come. But yeah, those guys really have like I said, that kind of that just the concentration that they kind of, you can just see it, like their kind of their whole face changes and their whole mindset just like engages when they've got a trumpet in front of them, and it's kind of, it must be, I think probably I did it at the right time as well. I think if someone had tried to kind of show me these kind of more refined, kind of more, yeah, mental concepts more than physical things, I probably wouldn't have had the patience maybe as a youngster to kind of understand it. But yeah, the Bill Adam routine, whilst I'm sure what I end up doing is more of an amalgam of what Jerry and some of what Gary showed me, it's what a pedagogue he was, and what a great man from all the stories I've heard. So it's certainly that mantra. And again, going to jazz college felt like it was telling me all the opposite things to what Jerry and Gary finally did, which was, I think the mantra in jazz college is not where I went, but people said, you know, like if you're going to practice jazz language in a room, it doesn't need to sound good. Or, you know, if you're working out ideas or harmonic ideas and it doesn't matter if you split it. Whereas the trumpet side of things, the calisthenics and the kind of rudiments, if you will, I think it's a great idea to always be making the best sound that you can at all times on the trumpet. And that just reinforces the muscle memory and the idea of your concepts, like you were saying. Those two are absolute Jedi. They're the best.
We've got some really great guys out there, and that's also where I kind of stole this title of the Trumpet Gurus, because there's so many guys that are just like on another level in terms of their diagnostic abilities and the concepts. Like you mentioned one of my favorites earlier, Bobby Shue. Bobby is just, yeah, he just blows your mind. He's like the trumpet Yoda. So guys like Jerry and Gary and Bobby and some Wayne,
hero, absolute hero.
Yeah, he is. He's one of those dudes. But so you actually got a chance to do some recording with Jerry and the boys, and
surreal. It was back in 2014. I think it was probably from the home studio, a strange connection. But I ended up recording on a big band record where Larry Williams, the sax player in the Seawood Horns, of course, I was a huge fan of his, but he was also featured on the same track. So I just graduated, and I think I probably had a bit more get up and go then in terms of trying to make and organise live events. But we ended up getting a gig together at Ronnie Scott's Jazz Club in London. It was always originally penned to be a tribute to Al Jarreau, and we were going to try and stupidly maybe try and do the Jarreau album live in concert. And so I contacted Larry to see if he wanted to be a part of it, and I had that introduction to him through this remote session. And I think I'd probably just been in touch with Jerry, or maybe just met him for the first time. And Larry was Al's MD, and so he said, "Well, why don't I see if Al fancies doing it?" And so I was just like, "Yeah, okay, that sounds good. That sounds fun." And for, again, just couldn't believe my luck. Al came over and had an amazing time with us recreating that album. I think he hadn't sung some of the songs to that record for about 30 years or so. And it was surreal. And he sung incredibly. And then we did 6 shows back to back, and again had a ridiculous trumpet team that we shared the heavy lifting on. So we had my good friends Andy Greenwood and Louis Dowdeswell either side of me. So it was kind of a case of, it was fine. We swapped it around and just about got through it unscathed, I think. But after that, and of course Al passed away a few years ago now, Larry said, well, look, we're going to do a tribute record for Al. And since he had fond memories of that London concert, he said, well, do you want to come over and kind of be a part of the horn section? And then I realised, hold on, that means that I'm filling Jerry's shoes in between Chuck and Gary. So yeah, it was surreal. Truly surreal.
Yeah, man, I would have had to change my pants about 4 or 5 times during that session.
Oh, wow. I mean, I don't want Jerry to know this necessarily, although he did he let me very kindly let me stay with him for a couple of nights, so he got to hear me try and fire my chops back into working. But it was just after the New Year, and I'd just been on holiday, and probably hadn't touched the trumpet for 2 weeks, maybe for Christmas as well. Just decided it was time for a bit of a break, and so suddenly after 3 weeks off, trying to get yourself back to match fitness, that was probably a lesson. I know that Jerry's always said he never had a day off, and now I kind of see why.
Yeah. Well, the big question is, if you stayed at Jerry's place, besides giving you the tips on the horn, did he give you any tips on the wine?
Oh wow, yeah. Do you know what? It's one of those things that I've asked him since lockdown if he's been getting the good stuff out, and it's if there's anyone that uses the Vivino app, it's quite funny to kind of check out how much some of Jerry's bottles are worth. But of course, like he says, he kind of got them all back at a time when it was all crazy. But yeah, I'm in my own very modest and inferior way. I am a big wine fan, definitely. But just I know what I like, but of course, like a lot of us, what I like I can't afford.
Very, very true. Exceptionally true. So, I mean, having worked in London, doing a lot of stuff in Europe, being able to come over to the U.S. and just stuff. I mean, do you feel a big difference in the music scene, like the vibe, the mindset of people?
Not at all. I mean, there's so many. I guess certain cities are kind of known for their specialities, but I think the real big hubs in the world, everyone's pretty forward thinking. They're not constrained by genre so much. There's so many amazing cities in the world. I mean, LA was really inspirational to go visit. New York's always been one of my favorite cities, and until recently, I've never really been able to do the jazz pilgrimage. But last time I was over there was last September, and I was getting down to Smalls Jazz Club in the Village and kind of going around the corner to the 55 bar and suddenly seeing in real life all these places that I used to watch live streams or get live CDs from these places. And I saw the great trumpet player Alex Sipiagin, who I've met a few times. He played a quintet gig that blew my head off. I was just sat there with my kind of my jaw on the floor the whole time. But it really is. I know it's a cliche, but it is like a universal language, and it's great that people can kind of travel all over the world and make music together. It's and it really is. That is one of the real thrills, is traveling and meeting other musicians and just seeing what's going on in other cities, and I guess trying to bring some of that inspiration back home, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's at the core of what I'm trying to do with this podcast, is to, obviously some of the standard names in the business, people like Jerry and Wayne have been on the show.
I can't wait to check it. I need to go back and check it all out.
But also to introduce people to up and coming artists, and even people that maybe aren't so much named performers, but are related to the business, whether it be on the manufacturing side, the tech side, the promotion side. But because we all share that one thing in common, which is we love music, and trumpet just happens to be the best way of making music in the world. And the rest of you can just wait your turn. But yeah, it's so important, I think, that we get a chance to share something that's so important to us, and especially as society has been a little bit wonky recently. Things have been crazy, societally, and I think that we got to hold on to the things that take us all to a higher level, and music is definitely one of those things.
I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more.
So I know that you went to the Royal Academy. Was your dad a musician? But I know, because I know that your grandfather.
Yeah, it skipped a generation. Aha, you have done your research.
Yes.
Well, that's kind of, it was one of these strange things. Again, I kind of guess I got into trumpet playing maybe a little bit later, hence why I frantically practiced to try and get into a university, because I was only really taking it seriously by about maybe 14 or 15, I'd say. It was never really, I wasn't really sure if it was for me. And then I discovered the jazz, I got the first taste of the jazz drug, and that had me hooked. But my granddad was an absolutely world-ending arranger, a Canadian guy called Robert Farnan, and he moved and emigrated to the UK in the 50s, I believe, or maybe even the late 40s. But from what I understand, he actually was kind of like the equivalent of Glenn Miller, but in the Canadian Armed Forces band. So he led that band in the 40s, and he was their lead trumpet player. So again, without knowing it, I had no idea that he was a trumpeter until I think I mentioned the Dizzy Gillespie autobiography.
Right.
I then got, when he passed away, I just started taking trumpet lessons, I think. And so one of the things I inherited was his signed copy of Dizzy's autobiography, which I think in the front cover, there was a Polaroid of him and Dizzy, and it said, "Dear Bob, I'm glad you gave up the trumpet when you did." Because he basically, he gave up the trumpet to be a professional composer and arranger.
Right.
And then since then, he worked with Tony Bennett, Frank Sinatra, Sarah Vaughan, J.J. Johnson, all these luminary, George Shearing, all these beautiful, lush orchestral kind of, he was very famous for his light orchestral, they term it. But I know Daniel Falcone, again, someone I've still yet to meet in person, but we've become kind of, I guess, virtual close pen pals. But I know he's a big fan of my granddad's music, and he, to be honest, he's got some access to some of his old scores that I would absolutely kill to see.
You might have to make a pilgrimage out to Las Vegas then.
I mean, that sounds like a lot of fun for all sorts of reasons.
Well, yeah, it could be dangerous. So.
No, I can't wait to meet Dan. Actually, he's been super cool to talk to, and of course, checking out his horn section work and everything has just been mind blowing too. And it's that's what I mean. It's this weird kind of, like you said, it's a weird international kind of scene now, and I think it's great to keep your eyes peeled for people all over the place and people that are popping up left, right, and centre from all sorts of, places in the world. It's kind of YouTube and Instagram. You can kind of, it has a strange amount of reach. I think people have to get it in check sometimes, but it's a great tool for if someone was to Google. I think that's how someone taught me, or a great masterclass I must have had pretty early on, was saying, if someone was to Google your name or to kind of put your name into YouTube, try and, if I'm not really, I don't know, people might disagree, but I'm not a real big social media guy, but I try and have enough on there that you can, of stuff that you can at least be proud of as like a point in time. And you can say, okay, well, that's part of me in a nutshell, and here's some of it. So I try and approach social media like that. But I mean, it's kind of, I don't know why I've just veered off topic there, but
that's okay. Yeah, we're good. Okay, so we have to do at least one little gearhead section. So, what kind of gear are you using these days?
Ever since coming back from those lessons with Jerry and Gary, I hadn't actually ever been a Bach guy before. I'd never played a Bach. A lot of people do growing up, I know, but I think I was on a student Yamaha, went to and from Yamahas, played a Smith Watkins instrument, which was great. Probably should have never sold it. But now, and I've been on the same one for quite a while now. It's just a stock Bach 37, silver-plated Bach. And actually, this is a great advert for him. But Gary Radke mouthpieces, I'm playing the same Wayne Bergeron Studio GR that I've been playing it for over 8 years now. And that's the original plating and everything. Gold-plated
Nice.
mouthpiece. Yeah, Wayne did an amazing concert that was, as you can imagine, was an absolute testosterone fest in a London basement jazz club with a big band in 2012. And I think that was probably just after he launched this. But I play his mouthpieces and have ever since then. They're absolutely fantastic. And once in a while, if there's something kind of filmic or more pseudo-orchestral, I might shove in a 3C. But for almost everything, I played just the Bergeron GR Studio. And corresponding flugel mouthpiece, I think I play the deeper one, and unfortunately it's gone through the wars, but it's still a great hooter. I've got the original Bobby Shoe 6310Z flugelhorn, and again, that's probably now about 20 years old, but it's still ticking, and that's the gear.
Okay, a gear, simple stuff. You Jerry got you hooked up with the Royer.
Yeah, well, yeah. Well, I mean, the microphone thing is a whole other gear tech side of things. But to be honest, in the recording world, I've learned more and more about it as the years have gone on. But you can actually start to use that a bit like a color palette in terms of using that. So that became quite an obsession at the right time, because again, I couldn't afford to buy them now, but I've got a lot of vintage Neumanns that they've been looked after, and I've had to get them serviced, etc. So I've got probably two of the mics that I throw up on most things would be, I've got some vintage 60s U67s. One's a Telefunken badge, one's an old Neumann badge. I've got 3 KM54s on Jerry's recommendation. As soon as I saw in a print interview that that's what he used and he swore by, I was just like, just eBay, reverb.com, whatever I could find, I'd try and snap it up. And they're getting rarer and rarer now. Royer ribbon. I love the Coles ribbons. They look kind of, most of them at my studio. I've only got a couple of mics here, but they look a bit like a black waffle, I don't know, like a weird. Yeah, they're great. They're fantastic. But yeah, the Royer's fantastic. I was just recording on it this morning. It's and it can take a beating, which I guess is kind of important living in front of a trumpet.
Oh yeah, it better be able to. All right. Well, we're going to move into a section. I do a rapid fire round. So I'm going to throw a bunch of questions at you, and you better take a big sip for this one. They're going to go all over the place. Some will be about music. Some will be about completely different things. But here's what we're going to do. The first one is going to be, who's the biggest influence in your life that is not a trumpet player?
That's a really tough question. Wow, so much for quickfire. You're gonna have to edit out all the We'll come back to that. I'll have to think of that in the back of my head. I don't even know. No, my family. There you go. My family.
Okay, there you go. Take that.
Yeah, of course,
okay. What's your favorite book?
Oh, I'd probably go with, I'm gonna say Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings. Okay. Yeah. All right. What's the worst movie you've ever seen?
Sharknado. That's pretty bad. That's pretty bad.
That's so bad it's good.
Yeah.
If you weren't a trumpet player, what would you want to do?
Be anything other than unemployed. I'm a big. I don't know if I've got the steady hands for it, but I'm a big watch fan. So I'd love to. There's something about the craft of watchmaking, and if I had steady hands, and probably patience is the key. But I'd love to. Yeah, I'd love to be a watchmaker. I feel like that would be quite fun.
What's your favorite watch?
I've got lots of dream watches, or as they call them, Grail watches. But I do have a couple of Rolexes, vintage Rolexes that are particularly special. One from my birth year, so it's as old as me, but it's ticking better. So I've got an old Submariner from the 90s, which is absolutely gorgeous. Yeah,
the 90s. God, you're making me feel old, dude.
Sorry, actually, that was
Yeah, see, I'm personally, I like IWCs and Patek Philippe's and Piaget's. Yeah, those are my holy grails. Rolex is just a little too big for me.
I know what you mean, and it's kind of, I quite like the older ones because they're a little bit more rounded. They're not quite as chunky or large now, and made out of some like older degrading materials. But yeah, I think the Patek Calatrava, ultimate dress watch of all time, and I love the big Pilot and the Pilot chronograph IWC. I'd love to have some of those. That'd be great.
All right. Well, when next time you come over to the States, we'll have to get together and we'll go to Tornos. Yeah, there we go.
I can waste a lot of time doing that.
Yeah, actually, there's I don't know if it's still there, but there's a really nice Tornos at down in Vegas. So maybe we can hook up with Danny and we'll go do some watch shopping.
There we go. Yeah.
Okay, back on track. What's your favorite drink?
Oh, gin and tonic.
G&Ts can't go wrong. You could you're having a dinner party, okay? And you can invite any 3 people that are still alive today. You can invite any 3 people to that party. Who would they be?
This is a great question. I like how you give me 3 here. I'm going to go with Kiefer Sutherland because I've seen him drunk at parties and it looks hilarious. That's pretty niche. And then I'm going to go for. I've always wanted again, probably just like Steve Lukather for the sake of it, just for the stories. Steve Lukather, yeah. Third and final. I guess we have to try and have a great thinker in there somewhere, don't we? Oh, Barack Obama. That would be incredible.
Okay, that would be a fun dinner party. Um, all right, lacquer plated or raw?
Raw, I'd say. Yeah, I've stripped my flugelhorn, so that's raw lacquer now.
All right. What's your favorite quote?
Uh, Again, I have to try and think of this. I'm sure it'll be something quite snappy, but I can't think. I should have prepped these. I should have prepped these.
We'll have to get you back for a second round then.
I know. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right. What's your greatest fear?
Ooh. Um. I guess everyone is scared that they're not going to be happy, but I'm happy most of the time, so that's all good. Yeah, yeah. Not being happy is the
Yeah.
greatest fear, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. All right. You could have any one superpower. What would it be?
Time travel, does that count?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's going to be a good one. I've got to say. Yeah, time travel.
Go back and fix those clams and
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Or just kind of going past COVID and
yeah,
see what it's like at the other side. Sorry,
yeah.
I've got some good quotes now. I probably can't whittle them down, but they're old, kind of funny studio musician quotes. The older I get, the better I was, which I quite like.
That
And,
I like that one.
I didn't get where I am today playing the way I do today. That's quite a good one.
We can get those on T-shirts.
Yeah, that's right.
What aspect of trumpet playing do you feel is the most overrated?
High notes, dare I say it? It's kind of I get way more kind of like impressed isn't the word, but I'd much rather listen to someone that's got like a really big fat sound from top to bottom. I think yeah, I don't know. It's weird because of course people will always kind of pick holes in that if you have any recorded evidence of you playing high, but that's certainly not my favorite part of it.
All right. Um, what aspect of trumpet playing do you think is the most underrated?
Consistency of sound. Yeah, the whole kind of trying to sound the same from bottom to top and making it a blank canvas. I guess I try and think of well, this is my, this is my, of course my opinion. I think that people should be able to have any dynamic at any note, at any range. I guess, or try and aim for that.
All right. Okay. Um, so speaking of your time travel skills,
There we go.
there you go. Here's the next one. You can go back in time to your younger self, and you could give yourself one piece of advice about music. What would it be?
I guess practice harder during my college years. I think, and also, yeah, I like kind of some of the anecdotes about Winton talking about play to move people, not to impress people. I guess that's kind of, but then of course you can always there's plenty of ways along the way where you can kind of come back to that way of thinking. But I like that idea of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that too. Same thing. You're going to travel back in time. This time, you're going to give yourself advice, one piece of advice about life.
Just live it. Just kind of enjoy the moment more, I think, rather than worrying about the past or the future. I can be a bit of a worrier, so just enjoy living in the moment and take it as it is.
Okay, and you're a young guy. You're representing a new generation of trumpet players. What do you want your legacy to be?
That people had good fun working alongside me, and that hopefully they saw me as a fan of music. Hopefully, trying to kind of play music on the trumpet rather than the trumpet for trumpet's sake, I guess. And certainly, the more I do it, the more I really love the writing side of things. So maybe it feels like that can be a bit more of a ordered, creative process sometimes than the trumpet, although it still is one of my favorite noises on earth.
Yeah. Well, Tom, I really appreciate you taking time to hang out with me today. This has been great.
Jose, you've been a great host. Thanks, man. It's
Hey,
great.
I don't know what else to say, but I will ask you this. If people want to find out more about you, where should they go?
Come and send me a Facebook message. Do whatever you want. Get in touch anyway. On Instagram, I've got the Horn section page, which I think is horn.house. And then on my Instagram's Tommy_Walshy. That's my handle, I believe the phrase is. Look how young and hip with I'm hip with the lingo. Yeah, that's my handle. And yeah, of course, if anyone wants to come and chat, I'll always be there to kind of just to hang.
And your YouTube channel?
Oh yeah, that's do you know what? I don't even know what that is. I guess maybe if you type in Tom Walsh trumpet, maybe some stuff will come up. I know that there's a shot putter called Tom Walsh, so that might be worth investigating along the way as well.
Well, you know, that's your side hustle.
Yeah.
So, but I think it's Tom Walsh horns, Tom Walsh trumpet. You can search both of those and find out, because if you haven't checked out any of the stuff that Tom has done, there's some phenomenal clips on that YouTube channel. So definitely check it out and be prepared to have your mind blown. So. Tom, thanks again for the time, man, and I hope that either in the future, this post-COVID world, that either you are out here on the East Coast or that I can get out. My wife is European, so we are hoping to be able to travel. She's from Romania, but we sometimes, like flights, sometimes it's much cheaper to fly into,
if you're flying to London, I'm down the road from Heathrow. Let's do it.
So that's what I'm thinking. I do have some other friends in London, so maybe we can get a nice hang together in London and some good music, some good laughs, and
great, mate. See you in the pub. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So thank you all very much for joining us on this episode, and make sure you check Tom out. Send him the message. He's a good dude. So, my pleasure. So, as always, folks, peace and slide grease. We're out. Hey, thank you so much for hanging with us today. This podcast is all about creating connection through our mutual love for the trumpet life. I hope that you learned a few things about today's guest and had some laughs along the way. Don't forget to give us a review. We love those 5-star ratings. And please share this podcast with your friends. We want to see our hang grow for show. Have a suggestion for a future topic or a guest? Hit me up at thetrumpetgurus@gmail.com. Our opening theme was written and performed by Lexi Signor, and all other music comes courtesy of The Greatest Funeral Ever. So in the words of W.C. Handy, life is like a trumpet. If you don't put anything into it, you don't get anything out. So go out there and let your trumpet sound. And I'll see you at the next hang.